Rain needled the Columbus night like 1,000 whispered judgments as Rachel Miller stood in the living room and understood that endings sometimes arrive in ordinary shoes. A husband pacing by a window, a phone screen he won't stop checking, and a crumpled $50 bill tossed like an insult that lands in a small, bright puddle. She did not cry when Mark called her deadweight, did not fold when he recited his practiced grievances about bills and burdens, did not plead when he yanked presses from hangers and flung them toward the yawning door where the storm breathed in, because something colder than fear had already settled inside her, a clarity that named the moment for what it was, an eviction, not a conversation. She saw the cheating spelled out in messages to Jessica, months of soon babe and little lies that matched the sharpness in his jaw. And when he told her to learn to stand on your own, she bent, pocketed the wet bill without ceremony, lifted the duffel he'd packed as if it were her dignity rolled tight, and stepped into the rain. Streetlights smeared gold across water as she walked past hedges and mailboxes, and curtains that twitched with curious silhouettes, refusing to pause under the weight of the gaze she felt from the front window. He would be standing there, inventorying her exit like a man counting wins. The gas station's buzzing neon made a meager sanctuary, the cashier's name tag, Alvin, a small proof that the world still had people in it. And when he pointed across to the Budget Inn, she crossed on the red, because red was fine, because there are nights when a person does not wait for permission to survive. The lobby's bleach and coffee air told its own story. The price, a near erasure of the bill, another subtraction she endured without flinching. In a narrow room with a sunburnt bedspread and curtains patterned like wilted flowers, she took inventory. $15, a phone with no apology on it, a body that shook only after the lock clicked, and a mind that refused the lie that this was the end. The rain eased to a metronome on the window, and she let silence return in careful inches, the kind that makes thoughts grow audible. How she had quit her job to bathe his mother when he would not. How love had been used like credit until the account overdrafted. How the word dependent had become a leash. Morning dragged a gray sheet over the city, and she rose with it, braced by motel coffee that tasted like warmed paper, and by a sentence she tried on until it fit. She would move without noise, without vengeance, with evidence. In the fluorescent aisle she chose cup noodles and a toothbrush, practical items for an interim life, and then saw the lottery slips, colorful, ridiculous, magnetic, and heard her mother's old warning about attacks on pain, but also heard, louder now, the contempt in Mark's voice, "You're worth about that much." Defiance doesn't always shout. Sometimes it selects 6 numbers with a dull pencil and a steady hand. 06 for June, their wedding month, now reclaimed. 12 for the day he'd call memory while erasing the woman who lived it. 19 for the girl she had been when belief came easy. 27 for the house he'd thrown her from. 02 for the years she washed his mother's hair and back. And 14 because the day had bruised her awake. She told Alvin no to Quick Pick because she was done outsourcing fate, tucked the warm, flimsy ticket in the slot where her wedding photo once sat, and returned to the room to write cover letters with precise verbs and no apologies. The television's chatter stayed off, the phone's rattle ignored, the noodles hot enough to remind her that small comforts still existed. As afternoon paled over the city, she folded the motel towel as if it were an agreement with herself. She would leave this room cleaner than she found it, even if no one clapped. Hope did not arrive as fireworks, but as a quiet presence that refused to be ushered out. And though she told it to sit politely in the corner, it pulled up a chair. By nightfall, the rain had settled into memory, and Rachel lay on the narrow bed, palms flat to either side, feeling the thin mattress hold her and the day release its bite. She had walked through a door someone else slammed, and on the other side she found something unglamorous and undefeated. Breath returning in measured counts, a spine realigning to truth, and a future that, for the first time in months, did not begin with his permission.
By Wednesday evening, the motel felt like a held breath. Thin walls, an air conditioner that rattled even when it rested, a ceiling stain shaped like a map she didn't recognize, and Rachel moved through it with careful purpose, finishing 3 job applications, copying bullet points from an old resume, and reminding herself that competence was a muscle that remembered. She brewed the free coffee that tasted like warm paper, ate noodles over the sink, and set the lottery ticket on the bedspread as if it were an ordinary receipt that happened to hum in a frequency only she could hear. When the local news jingle finally announced the drawing, she stood at the foot of the bed with her palms open, the way people stand at hospital windows or chapel doors, not because they are religious, but because hope asks the body to make room. The first white ball funked into place. 6. And her eyes snapped to the printed 06 she had chosen for June, their wedding month repurposed as a boundary. The second, 12, and the room sharpened. The third, 19, and a laugh escaped her, a startled sound that she smothered with the back of her hand, as if she could spook luck by acknowledging it. 27, and she rose without meaning to, the bed protesting with a soft squeak. 2, and there was a ringing in her ears that made the world sound far away, except for the announcer's final cadence. 14. The red ball, the hinge of everything. She stared at the ticket, traced each number with a fingertip, like a child reading aloud, then pinched her forearm hard enough to leave a crescent bloom. When the pain bloomed, relief did too. This was real, in the way rain is real, and courts are real, and cruelty is real. And now, for once, abundance was real. She didn't scream or dance or call anyone, because she had learned that the shape of safety is quiet. So she signed the back with a trembling hand, slid the ticket into an envelope and then into another envelope, a nesting doll of prudence, and tucked the bundle against her ribs where no thief could separate it from her heartbeat. She searched on her slow laptop for How to Claim Lottery, Ohio, and read the plain commandments: sign it, secure it, don't post it, consider counsel, move carefully. Dawn felt like gossip, too bright for secrets, and she walked to a downtown bank when the doors opened, rented a safe deposit box with a clerk who asked only for ID and a signature, and watched the small metal door close with a click that sounded like a life slotting into a track. On the lobby bench, her hands shook, not from fear, from the sudden space inside her chest where dread used to live. So she filled it with a plan. Stay anonymous, get help, don't tell Mark, don't tell anyone who might tell someone who knows Mark. Back at the motel, a text arrived from Darren, her former supervisor. Are you okay? And she typed back a thank you that felt like a hand on a warm radiator, and then set the phone face down. She walked 2 blocks to a diner with red neon and ordered a hamburger she ate slowly, chewing past the old habit of scarcity. She kept her eyes on her own table when a news teaser on the mounted TV mentioned a mystery trust in Franklin County, because she had already chosen her posture. No flinching, no noise. By early afternoon, she had an appointment at a tidy law office that smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and paper, and when attorney Linda Carter extended a steady hand and said, "Tell me everything from the beginning," Rachel did, not with tears, but with timestamps. Monday night eviction, Tuesday morning purchase, Wednesday draw, Thursday bank. Linda nodded as if ticking boxes only she could see, and said the sentence Rachel needed. The separation predates the purchase. That matters. Then mapped out the rest. Claim through a trust with a name that means nothing. Open a P.O. box. Get a prepaid number. Keep the old phone for job leads. Buy nothing flashy. Let truth do the heavy lifting while you get small good things done. Walking back into late sun, Rachel felt the day tilt toward a new center. Not the dizzying fantasy of 10 million, but the practical weight of choices made in sequence. Breathe, secure, consult, prepare. At a crosswalk, the light flipped red, and she crossed anyway, not in defiance of rules, but in obedience to the fact that sometimes survival does not wait for permission.
Friday arrived with a sky rinsed clean, and Rachel moved through it like someone who had rehearsed a quiet life and was finally allowed to perform. She met Linda at the law office where papers were slid, signatures nested, and the Sunstone Trust took shape with a name that meant nothing to anyone but safety. At the claims desk, there were no cameras, no confetti, only forms, tax disclosures, the clerk's careful instructions, and the calm insistence of process. By noon, Linda pressed a plain envelope into her hand with the new P.O. box number and a checklist. New prepaid phone, new email, new bank at a different branch, no social posts, no new car until they said. Rachel complied with a precision that felt like prayer, then returned to the motel for the last time, folded the thin towel as if sealing a chapter, and carried her duffel out into open light. The one bedroom she leased through the trust was brick and modest, with maple trees glinting over a parking lot and a laundry room that smelled like soap. And when she turned the key, the click felt like the first sentence of a kinder book. She ate eggs in her own small kitchen, washed the plate, and sat down to write a letter to herself. Who she had been, who she refused to become, the promises that money would not be allowed to rewrite. Then the world sent its reminder that good fortune is chatty. A 30-second TV teaser about a mystery trust claiming a local jackpot, aired over sports highlights, sloppy, almost harmless except for the one detail that made her stomach stone. Sources say the winner stayed 2 nights at a budget motel. Linda called immediately. Do nothing different. Don't confirm. If anyone asks, you don't discuss rumors. And Rachel said she understood, brushing crumbs from the counter with hands that suddenly wanted to shake. That evening, as dusk pooled purple in the lot, a black SUV idled by the curb, with its window lowering like a theatrical curtain, and Mark leaned across, smiling the old salesman smile. She locked her gray sedan, kept her posture small but straight, and listened to him attempt revision. The storm had been a rough patch. The 50 helped to get through the night. Jessica, not what he thought. Marriage, a partnership, and the law clear on halves, all delivered with buzzwords he had practiced in a mirror. She offered him nothing, no yes, no confession, not even a flinch, only one clean truth. You told me to leave before I bought anything. When he blinked at the timing, she saw the math stall behind his eyes, and his face slipped into the sharper shape she knew too well. He placed a law firm's card in her hand like a dare, promised court, and left with a small tire chirp that sounded like entitlement in rubber. Upstairs, she photographed the card and texted it to Linda. He found me, says he'll sue, then set her phone on the counter and started recording as a habit, because habit is how people stay whole. It proved useful sooner than she wanted. 2 days later, a rap at her motel door, before the move, had come in a rhythm only one person used, his voice sliding under the gap. "Ray, open up, we need to talk." And she had pressed her palm to the wood, while her other hand, steady, deliberate, captured audio. Now that file sat in a folder Linda labeled Motel Entry Attempt, and replayed 10 seconds whenever fear tried to rewrite the past. But fear was not the only career. Tasha, from the salon, slipped a note under Rachel's apartment door. "Ray, call me." And when they spoke, the news braided itself into a timeline that made Linda hum with satisfaction. At Mitch's bar, Mark had told anyone with a beer that Rachel owed him half of a jackpot, had used sentences like "dragged in by her hair if necessary," and a cousin of Jessica's had boasted that they knew about the numbers the day after the draw. Alvin, the gas station cashier, sometimes drank there, which explained how a sad woman in a motel became public trivia. Rachel hung up, rinsed her hands as if rumor left residue, and sent the summary to Linda, who replied, "Good, that shows intent and sequence. Keep still, document everything." In the mornings, Rachel volunteered at a women's shelter kitchen under the first name only, chopping onions beside Maya, letting usefulness stack like bricks against dread. In the afternoons, she filled out job applications and learned the bus routes. In the evenings, she walked the maple-shadowed lot and told the part of herself that waited for the knock that she was not a secret, not a debt, not a rumor with legs. When the process server came at noon with the manila envelope, she opened the door because Linda had told her to expect it, and she let the complaint land on the table like a prop in a play she refused to star in. Words like marital share and constructive trust sprawled there, theatrical and thin. She took a photo, drove to Linda's office, and laid it between them. "Spaghetti," Linda said, already drafting the...
The days between the complaint and the first hearing braided themselves into a steady discipline. Linda drafted the answer with Rachel beside her, building a spine of dates that would not end. Monday night eviction documented by texts and the motel receipt. Tuesday morning purchase corroborated by the cashier's terminal log and the timestamp on the lottery machine. Wednesday draw matched to the on-air broadcast and Rachel's signed ticket. Thursday safe deposit rental and Friday claim through Sunstone Trust. Each exhibit labeled, copied, and tabbed in a binder that clicked shut with an air of finality. While Linda filed a motion to dismiss Mark's equitable claim and in the alternative to bifurcate property issues from protection concerns, Rachel worked the shelter kitchen in the mornings and her own list in the afternoons, acquiring small pieces of normal like they were rations in a siege. New P.O. box, new email, a quiet bank at a different branch, a prepaid phone with only 2 numbers saved. Tasha came to the office in a denim jacket and told her story under oath, how Mark, sloppy with drink and grievance, had threatened to drag her in by her hair and boasted that he would get what's his because she can't hide behind some cute trust. Alvin signed an affidavit limited to what he'd lawfully recall. He sold a ticket to a woman who seemed sad but composed. He later heard bar talk connecting a motel and a jackpot. He regretted ever speaking loosely. Linda obtained Mark's text that read, "Don't come back, keys on the sill, 50 is enough to get you gone," and had it certified from the carrier. The audio file from the motel door, a short clip of his voice pushing past the boundary she had set, was transcribed with the precise time code stamped at the bottom. When a junior associate asked whether to include the crumpled bill at all, Linda slid a plastic sleeve across the table with it inside and simply said, "Human beings read these," then added it to the demonstratives as Exhibit K. Discovery began like a hornet swarm, requests for admissions, interrogatories, bank statements, phone records, and Linda turned the chaos into numbered tasks, reminding Rachel that process is a kind of raft. Mark sat for a deposition and performed a version of himself he believed persuasive, provider, patient husband, victim of a sudden change of heart, until the questions tightened to timing and he blinked at a copy of his own "Don't come back" message, then stumbled into a sentence that changed shape mid-air. "I mean, yes, I told her to get out that night, but we weren't, well, not formally. How am I supposed to know the exact hour she—" And Linda, expression unchanged, drew a neat circle around his answer on her notepad. In the evenings, Rachel practiced the quiet rituals that made her feel like a person again, washing a dish until it squeaked, opening the window to let in tree scent and bus hum, sitting on the floor with her back to the couch and her feet on cool wood to remind her body that the ground is still the ground. Fear still visited, but it knocked now and waited for permission. The pretrial conference arrived with its own choreography. Lawyers at counsel tables, the judge's calendar book thick with other people's emergencies, and Linda opened with the shape of the case in clean lines. There is no marital share in an asset acquired after expulsion. The court has a recording of attempted contact and sworn testimony of threats. The Sunstone Trust protects identity for safety, not spectacle. Opposing counsel tried to widen the frame to the whole marriage, but the judge kept resetting to the spine. I care about dates, and set a narrow evidentiary hearing on timing and conduct. When Rachel took the stand for that hearing, her voice was steady because she had rehearsed with facts instead of anger. She spoke of bathing his mother with the tenderness of someone who hasn't forgotten how to be decent, of the rain, of the 50 in her palm, of the motel receipt timestamp, of the numbers she chose for reasons that belonged only to her,
of the safe deposit click, of the law office lemon smell. She did not speak of revenge because there was none, only a boundary. Mark's attorney objected to the $50 as prejudicial theater, but the judge overruled softly. Prejudice is not the same as relevance, counsel, and let it sit on the edge of the witness box in its clear sleeve, a small artifact with a loud meaning. In the hallway at recess, Mark tried to bruise the air with a look that used to unnerve her, and found only a woman aligning her spine to the wall and breathing like a metronome. Linda touched Rachel's elbow and murmured, "Almost there, let the record work." And when they returned, the judge asked 2 questions that mattered more than speeches. On what date and at what time did you instruct her to leave? And on what date and at what time was the ticket purchased? The answers, fixed to documents and devices, fit together like a lock and key. Outside, the afternoon had the glare of a city that goes on regardless, and Rachel stood a moment in the bright, feeling the strange, clean ache of courage well spent.
Monday's calendar stacked with strangers' troubles. The courthouse felt like a machine that turned noise into record, and Rachel moved through it with the same quiet choreography she had practiced for weeks. Arrive early, hold the binder like a compass, meet Linda's eyes instead of Mark's. In the corridor, Mark performed charm for his lawyer and the corridor air, angling his body so his watch flashed, as if metal could confer credibility. But when the clerk called their case and the heavy door sighed them inside, performance thinned and paper thickened. The judge, brisk, dry, and allergic to speechifying, announced that today's hearing would be narrow on timing and conduct, and Rachel felt something unclench because narrow was the word she had been living by. Opposing counsel tried to widen it at once, the whole marriage, a pattern of dependence, but the bench cut him back to dates, receipts, recordings. Linda stood, measured and spare, and placed the spine they had built on the rail. Exhibit A, the text that read, "Don't come back," keys on the sill. 50 is enough to get you gone. Carrier certified. Exhibit B, the motel receipt, stamped 11:43 p.m. Monday. Exhibit C, the terminal log showing a ticket purchase at 9:07 a.m. Tuesday. Exhibit D, the signed ticket and safe deposit box rental. Exhibit E, the audio clip time-stamped from the hallway knock. Exhibit F, Tasha's affidavit recounting his bar threats. Exhibit K, the crumpled 50, sealed and labeled. She spoke less like a litigator delivering thunder and more like a cartographer laying down coordinates, until even the room could feel the map settle. When Rachel took the stand again, her hands remained still on the wood because she let sentences begin with times and end with facts. And when Mark's lawyer tried to bait her with, "And you didn't contribute income, correct?" Linda rose. Objection, relevance, given the court's limitation. And the judge sustained without looking up. Then Mark testified, and as if pulled by a magnet he didn't perceive, steered himself into the ditch they had marked. "I paid everything," he insisted, softening his voice. And then dates, the judge said. "Monday," Mark said, blinking. "I told her to go cool off, just for the night." "Read your text," Linda instructed him gently, and he read the words, "Don't come back," out loud, the courtroom air receiving them like a signature. When counsel attempted a last-minute salvage with talk of equitable interests and marital expectations, the judge interlaced her fingers and spoke in the tone of a clock. "Equity follows facts. Facts follow time. Here, time is documented." Then entered temporary orders on the record. The proceeds were to remain solely under the Sunstone Trust's control pending final judgment, with no distributions to either party without court notice. Both parties were prohibited from contacting each other outside counsel. Any harassment or third-party pressure would trigger contempt. A status date was set for 30 days, and the rest of the day given over to other lives. In the hallway afterward, Mark's eyes sparked with the indignation of a man who believed the frame should bend to fit him, and he drifted close enough that Rachel could smell the mint he used to hide adrenaline.
but Linda's presence was a quiet fulcrum between them. "Email, not corridor remarks," she said, and guided Rachel toward the elevator. Outside, noon light struck the steps, and the city went on. Horns and street food steam and a bus brake exhaling, and Rachel realized the strange relief of having said only what was needed. Later, at the shelter, she sliced carrots into steady coins and let the day bleed out of her fingers with the orange dye, Maya humming beside her and the radio murmuring weather. That night, Mark tried a different stage, social media, posting a vague lament about loyalty and users, prompting friends to fill in blanks with outrage, and Tasha texted a screenshot with a single eye-roll emoji before deleting it at Rachel's request. Linda's email arrived. "Good day. Temporary orders strong. He may escalate privately. Keep documenting. We're preparing the motion for summary judgment on the marital claim." Rachel replied with a thank you and a scanned receipt from the shelter's volunteer shift, because proof had become a comfort. And then she sat on her floor with tea and wrote 3 lines on an index card. "I tell the truth once. I let the record carry it. I do not chase noise." 2 days later, she bought a used gray sedan in cash with Linda's green light, the kind of car that disappears into parking lots, and drove it to the bank, to the market, to the shelter, each errand a stitch in a life that was no longer made of begging. The knock that used to own her chest arrived again in memory only, and when fear tested the door, she breathed through 4 counts and watched it leave. On Sunday, she sat in the laundromat watching sheets turn into wind and thought about how endings had looked like slamming doors, and how in fact they also looked like signatures, benches, and someone saying, "narrow," from the bench. Equilibrium was not triumph, but it was a center, and she could feel herself choosing it on purpose.
Discovery arrived like weather, sudden, everywhere, indifferent, and Rachel learned to meet it with lists and gentle meals, while Linda's office became a factory of clarity. Subpoenas to the carrier for message metadata, a request to the lottery terminal vendor for the purchase audit trail, bank statements tracing a clean line from the trust to rent and groceries, never to spectacle, a sworn declaration from the bank clerk who rented the safe deposit box at 9:14 a.m. Thursday, and a neat log of every call Mark placed to numbers not his wife's during the 6 months he claimed fidelity. Mark's attorney, louder than his client but less careful, served interrogatories that called the Sunstone Trust a scheme to conceal, and Linda, unamused, answered with statutes and cases, Ohio's equitable framework, post-separation acquisitions, the doctrine that time is a fence, and filed a motion for summary judgment on the marital claim that read like a metronome: date, exhibit, law, conclusion. Outside the pages, Rachel kept her life small and full, chopping onions under Maya's easy chatter, driving the gray sedan to the market, learning the cashier's name, Keisha, and tucking receipts into a folder because proof, once a weapon, had turned into a blanket. When a gossip site posted "Who is Sunstone?" with a blurry courthouse photo and guesses that mostly guessed wrong, Linda emailed 2 sentences. "No comment means no fuel. Screenshots saved, that's all." And Rachel closed the tab and stirred lentils while rain marbled the window. Mark tried new pressure points in old ways, a text to Tasha framed as concern: "Tell Rachel we can end this cleanly if she stops the act." A voicemail to Rachel's old number that sounded like a prayer for an audience: "We built a life." 3 parking lot passes by her complex in a black SUV that the property manager logged and quietly promised to mention if asked. Linda asked the court for a narrow civil protection order limited to physical presence, attached the motel audio and the property manager's incident notes, and the judge, low voice, clipped patience, granted it for 90 days with the line that mattered most: "This is not theater, this is boundary." In the same week,
Opposing counsel floated a reasonable settlement recognizing marital expectations, and Linda, polite as a scalpel, replied that the expectation of taking from a post-expulsion asset was not reasonable in law or equity, then attached a draft of the summary judgment reply that used Mark's own "don't come back" text as a lodestar. Time, which had once been a fog made of panic, began to segment into clean pieces, and Rachel filled each piece with something that put her back in her body, walking under the maples, stretching on the living room floor, writing a list that began with water, sleep, sunlight, and ended with call cousin when ready, not because of fear. When the court issued its ruling on a bright Thursday, the words were dry and merciful. Defendant's motion for summary judgment on plaintiff's equitable distribution claim is granted. The court finds no triable issue as to the marital character of the lottery proceeds. The acquisition occurred after plaintiff expelled defendant from the marital residence. Remaining issues limited to dissolution formalities and enforcement of no-contact orders. Linda called, voice warm for the first time. It's done on the money part. He can posture about feelings in other venues, but not here. And Rachel sat on the edge of her bed and cried a quiet, bewildered gratitude that tasted like clean water. Mark posted a subtweet about paper victories, and it fluttered empty in a thread of men who applauded each other, while he told Mitch's bar that judges could be appealed like ump calls. And Tasha texted back a single line, "Time is undefeated." Rachel met a financial planner in a small office that refused leather chairs, spoke about boring miracles, an annuity ladder, emergency funds for women leaving in storms, a quiet scholarship at the shelter with no plaque, and felt her shoulders drop as money lost its costume and became oxygen. That night, she wrote herself 3 more lines and taped them beside the mirror. I don't perform my wounds, I practice my days, I let proof sleep on the table and wake by itself.
The weeks after summary judgment unfurled like a road finally scraped clear of ice, and Rachel treated each day like a modest errand on the way to a finish line that was paperwork rather than spectacle. Dissolution forms, inventory of the few belongings still at Mark's house, a ledger of tiny debts that were really habits she no longer owed, streaming passwords, the casserole dish his mother had loved, a winter coat with a broken zipper. Linda filed a motion for attorney's fees tied to his baseless claim and a request to extend the civil protection order beyond 90 days, attaching a neat packet of logs from the property manager and screenshots of vague posts that asked the internet to be his jury. A mediator session appeared on the docket, mandatory in their county, and Rachel arrived with the same binder, the same navy dress, the same breath count she'd learned to stack like bricks. Mark came with cologne, a new tie, and a smile that had always assumed doors would open. The mediator, an unfussy woman with a sandpaper voice, separated them into rooms and carried offers like weather between buildings. His first proposal read like a fantasy: mutual social media non-disparagement, symbolic settlement acknowledging partnership, and impossibly, a public statement that no abuse occurred. And Linda, polite as a mathematician, wrote "no" because false across the margin, then countered with the only things that mattered: a clean division of the remaining everyday property, a consent order barring contact and third-party harassment, an arrangement for the pickup of boxes in the presence of an off-duty deputy, and a commitment to say nothing at all. By afternoon, Mark's lawyer drifted toward realism, but Mark himself pushed one last script through the mediator's door. He wanted to speak to Rachel just 5 minutes, to find closure, to own his part without paper between them. The mediator shook her head on the threshold before she delivered the message. Closure is a hallway with locks. Today we are only installing them. Outside, a reporter loitered by the courthouse steps, eyes bright with scavenger patience. And when he aimed a question about Sunstone at Rachel, she offered the single, practiced sentence Linda had drilled: I don't discuss rumors. Then kept walking, because privacy was not secrecy. Inside the case file, new proof took its seat quietly. Jessica, subpoenaed for a limited deposition, wore a cardigan and a scowl and told the court reporter in a flat voice that Mark had bragged he'd set her free with a 50 and get what's his when the numbers hit, that he'd said marriage is a hedge, and that he'd kept a folder labeled Strategy full of copied Google results about community property that didn't apply to Ohio. Linda did not smile. She simply stapled the transcript to the fees motion and circled the phrases that courts recognize as entitlement dressed up as law. In the margins of life, Rachel kept choosing substance over noise. At the shelter, she proposed an anonymous emergency fund for women pushed out of doors with pocket change, and the director's eyes filled the way rain does before it begins. Darren, her former supervisor, wrote a character letter that didn't varnish. He described a worker who had once dragged herself to the office after bathing an elder through the night and still met a deadline, then sent Rachel an email with a single line, "The door here is open whenever you want one." At home, she framed nothing but a quiet index card, 3 lines she had written the night the ruling came. "I tell the truth once, I let the record carry it, I do not chase noise," and set it beside a vase of grocery store daisies that did not pretend to be more than they were. When the final dissolution hearing date landed, Wednesday at 9, Linda rehearsed with Rachel the only statements she might need: name, address, date of separation, confirmation that irretrievable breakdown was not a metaphor but a fact. Mark, learning there would be no stage for speeches, tried the back door of sympathy, a late-night voicemail that began with "I'm sorry" and ended with "We could still make an announcement together," and Rachel forwarded it to Linda without listening twice. On the morning of court, she arrived early again and watched the building wake. Janitors wheeling barrels, a bailiff joking softly, the elevator lights blinking up and down like measured breath. In the hallway, Tasha squeezed Rachel's fingers and whispered, "Almost there," then drifted to a bench with Maya, who had come in her kitchen sneakers and wrote a note on a folded napkin that said, in a looping hand, "You stood kind in a mean season." Inside, the judge moved through the docket like a metronome, granting dissolutions to people whose love had given out in other ways, and when Rachel's name was called, the room sounded like paper and chairs and the small rattle of pens. The questions were simple, the answers clean. Mark tried to tack on a coda, something about learning and mutual, and the judge lifted a palm without looking up, a gesture that might as well have been a gavel. Orders entered, dissolution granted, fees reserved pending written decision, civil protection extended 1 year with mutual no contact, and a carve-out for logistics through counsel only. Property exchange scheduled with a deputy's presence Saturday at 10. Outside, sunlight laid a plain blessing across the steps. Rachel did not pose or pronounce. She texted the shelter director she'd be in by noon, put the binder on the passenger seat of the gray sedan, and drove toward a kitchen where onions waited and a radio murmured weather, feeling in her chest not victory's trumpet, but the steadier instrument of a life that had learned how to keep time.
Saturday's exchange unfolded without drama because it had been engineered to leave no room for it. An off-duty deputy with folded arms by the stoop, Linda's paralegal with a clipboard, 3 boxes labeled kitchen, books, winter, 1 garment bag, a casserole dish wrapped in newspaper, because some histories can be set down gently. Mark appeared late, cologne first, and tried to make the air remember him, but the deputy's nod kept conversation to inventory and signatures, and when he attempted a final aside, "You don't have to be like this, Ra," she looked at the deputy, not at him, and asked, "Are we done?" They were. She carried the last box to the gray sedan and felt a simple relief that did not need to announce itself. That afternoon, back in her small brick apartment, she unpacked deliberately, choosing what stayed and what left. The winter coat with the broken zipper went to a donation bag. The casserole dish took a quiet shelf. The ring, long in a drawer, went into a small envelope labeled Archive, because endings are easier when objects get their own doors to close. A week later, the judge's written order arrived. Attorney's fees granted in part, civil protection extended 1 year with mutual no contact, property division finalized exactly as the mediator had suggested, and Rachel read it at the kitchen table with tea, appreciating how law renders chaos into sentences that fit on a page. She met the financial planner again in the modest office and turned 10 million into boring, durable choices, a laddered annuity, a rainy day reserve, monthly transfers to the anonymous emergency fund at the shelter, and seed money for a scholarship that required only 2 lines from applicants: what you need tonight and who can verify it. At the shelter, the director taped a discreet sign by the office door: Sunstone Emergency, no questions, just forms. And Rachel watched a woman leave with taxi vouchers and grocery cards and a face that looked like breath returning. Darren called to say an operations role had opened, not glamorous, but steady, and she said yes to an interview, because money could be oxygen, and also ballast. When fear visited, it knocked now and waited on the mat. She practiced letting it in with tea and letting it out with a list: water, sleep, sunlight, work, call cousin. This time she did, and went for a weekend that was all cinnamon rolls and a couch that held her like a witness. Gossip flared and fizzled. Another blog guessed another wrong name. A thread on social media tried to summon outrage and managed only echoes. Linda's email stayed the same: no comment is oxygen deprivation for rumor. Keep it that way. One evening, Jessica stopped her in a grocery aisle beside the beans, hair scraped back, eyes tired. "I told the truth," she said quietly, not asking for absolution. "I know," Rachel said quietly, "because not every scene needs a moral." She bought daisies again and set them by the index card on the counter, 3 lines that had carried her. "I tell the truth once, I let the record carry it, I do not chase noise." On a soft Friday, she drove the gray sedan to the bank, opened the safe deposit box, and lifted the plastic sleeve that held the crumpled 50 he'd thrown, Exhibit K, now simply a relic. She didn't keep it out of spite, she kept it as calibration, a weight to place in her palm whenever memory tried to blur edges. Outside, the maple shook a cool shade onto the lot, and she stood under it long enough to feel how ordinary afternoons can be holy. The shelter's kitchen grew into a second home, Maya teaching her to dice onions faster without their juice catching in her throat. A girl with purple-crowned horses on her coloring page, returning with a new picture to tape on the fridge. Laughter that didn't need permission. The interview at Darren's office felt like stepping back into a room she had left for a good reason and was now entering for a better one. When the offer came, steady pay, health insurance, we're lucky if you say yes, she said yes, and bought a pair of shoes that were comfortable on purpose. Sometimes, driving home at dusk, she would pass the street where the old house sat, and keep going without looking, because the past doesn't vanish, it just stops steering. On the anniversary of the night the rain wrote its diagnosis on her life, she walked by the river and wrote a letter to the woman she had been. "Thank you for picking up the 50. Thank you for crossing on red. Thank you for choosing evidence over explanations," and tucked it into a library book for a stranger to find. On a Tuesday, the court closed the case administratively with a 1-line docket entry that would mean nothing to anyone else and everything to her. She celebrated by making stew at the shelter and leaving early to nap with the window open, city sounds low like tide. When the phone buzzed later with an unknown number, she let it pass. Boundaries sometimes sound like silence, and texted Linda, "All quiet." The reply came back, "As designed." In the mirror, she caught her own face and recognized it, not triumphant, not photographed, simply steady. The story would be told as luck by people who need magic to make sense of mercy, but Rachel knew the truer arithmetic. A door slammed, a woman walked, a pencil marked 6 numbers, a record kept its promises, and a life assembled itself from small, lawful choices. She set the kettle, opened the window to the maple hush, and felt the future arrive with no bang at all, just room.